As the coffin began to shake violently, gasps filled the air and eyes widened in terror. What was happening beneath the surface? Sebastian's heart raced as he rushed forward, but nothing could prepare him for the shocking discovery waiting inside. But hey, before we dive into the story, do yourself a favor and pause the video right now. Go hit that like button, and let's see if we can make this video reach 1,000 likes. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to your favorite story channel. Also, make sure to ring the notification bell so you never miss out on the latest and weirdest stories. Trust us, you won't want to miss what's coming your way. Now sit back, relax, and prepare to be amazed as we take you on an unforgettable ride. Don't forget to engage with us in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Without further ado, let's dive right in. The cemetery was cloaked in a dreary haze, the overcast sky reflecting the somber mood of the mourners gathered around Betty's grave. She had been a beloved member of the community, a kind-hearted school teacher who had touched the lives of many. The priest's voice wavered through a final prayer as Betty's coffin began its slow descent into the ground, but then something unthinkable happened. A tremor quivered through the earth beneath their feet, and soon after the coffin began to shake. It wasn't a subtle movement, it was violent, as though something inside was trying to escape. Eyes widened in disbelief, and the murmurs among the mourners grew into panicked whispers. Betty's husband, Sebastian, was the first to notice the strange movement. At first, he dismissed it as a mechanical issue with the equipment lowering the coffin. But the shaking intensified. He turned to the priest, his voice trembling. "Is it supposed to be doing that?" The priest frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. He approached the coffin, his face growing pale as he realized the severity of the situation. "Stop!" the priest called out, his voice booming over the frightened crowd. The workers halted immediately, unsure of what to do next. The mourners gasped, their panic spreading like wildfire. Some rushed forward trying to steady the coffin, but the violent movement continued. Sebastian's heart raced as fear clawed at his throat. He was desperate for answers, but no one had any. His grief, already unbearable, now twisted into something much darker. Sebastian looked at the priest, eyes pleading for guidance. "What's happening to my wife? Why is this happening?" His voice cracked under the weight of his anguish. The priest, equally rattled, hesitated before answering. "I don't know, but we need to open the coffin." Sebastian recoiled. The idea of seeing his wife's body, which had been disfigured in a horrific car accident, was something he had tried to avoid. He wanted to remember her as she had been in life, not as the broken figure he had last seen. His mother, sensing his turmoil, stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "I'll do it," she said, though Sebastian could see the fear in her eyes. She was only offering because she couldn't bear to see her son suffer any more than he already had. He wanted to accept her offer, but he couldn't. This was his burden to carry. "Mom, no, I have to do this," he replied, his voice steadying as he made the difficult decision. His mother nodded in understanding, guiding the rest of the mourners away to the condolence room. However, some of Betty's closest friends refused to leave, desperate to know what was going on. Only after much coaxing did they finally relent, leaving Sebastian alone with the priest. Once everyone was gone, the shaking suddenly stopped. The eerie silence that followed was almost more unsettling than the chaos before. Sebastian and the priest exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of what to make of it. Using the hydraulic lift, they moved the coffin back onto solid ground. The two men stared at it for a long moment, waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. "Are you sure you want to do this?" the priest asked gently, his concern etched in his face. "I can open it for you if you'd prefer. You don't have to ruin your last memories of her." Sebastian's heart ached at the thought, but he knew the answer before the priest even finished speaking. "Number, she was my wife." "I have to do this," he said with finality. With a deep breath, Sebastian approached the coffin. His hands trembled as he touched the lid. The priest stood beside him, offering silent support. Sebastian hesitated, his mind flooded with memories of Betty. Their wedding day, their travels, the quiet evenings spent together. His chest tightened as the weight of grief threatened to consume him, but he forced himself to push through it. Slowly, he lifted the lid. The creak of the hinges sounded deafening in the silence. As the coffin opened, Sebastian's breath caught in his throat. There she was, Betty, her face serene as though she were merely asleep. The peacefulness of her expression did little to comfort him, though. Something was wrong. He could feel it. But what? His eyes scanned the interior of the coffin, searching for any sign of what had caused the earlier disturbance. His gaze landed on her hands. There were small faint scratches on her fingers, barely noticeable. His pulse quickened. Had she been trying to escape? His thoughts spiraled as his mind struggled to make sense of it all. Could it have been some horrible mistake? Had Betty been alive this whole time? His logical mind told him it wasn't possible. The doctors had been certain of her death after the accident, but still the unsettling notion gnawed at him. "I don't understand," Sebastian murmured, his voice barely audible. The priest, who had been silent, stepped closer, inspecting the scratches. "These could have been from something inside the coffin," he said, trying to offer a rational explanation. But there was no denying the discomfort in his tone. Just as Sebastian was about to close the lid, something small and unexpected shifted in the corner of the coffin. Both men froze. Sebastian leaned in, his heart pounding in his chest. A small movement, like the flutter of fabric. Or was it something else? Out of the shadows emerged a small, frightened squirrel. It darted from the corner of the coffin, causing both men to stumble back in surprise. The tiny creature had been hiding within the lining of the coffin, likely trapped during the funeral preparations. The mystery of the shaking coffin had been solved, but the relief that should have followed didn't come immediately. Instead, Sebastian felt a strange mix of emotions: shock, confusion, and oddly a sense of bittersweet irony. Betty had loved animals. She had spent countless hours in their garden caring for the wildlife that visited: birds, squirrels, stray cats. Betty had taken care of them all. It seemed almost poetic that even in death, a small creature had found comfort with her. Sebastian knelt beside the coffin, watching the squirrel as it trembled in the corner. The initial fear that had gripped him now gave way to something softer. He gently scooped up the squirrel, cradling it in his hands. It seemed lost and confused, just as he felt. For a long moment, he simply sat there, holding the tiny creature, his mind filled with memories of Betty's kindness. She would have laughed at this, her funeral disrupted by a squirrel. Sebastian smiled faintly through his tears, a sense of peace slowly settling over him. The priest, who had been watching silently, placed a hand on Sebastian's shoulder. "It seems Betty still has a way of surprising us," he said softly. Sebastian nodded, his grief still heavy, but no longer suffocating. As he looked down at the small creature in his hands, he realized that caring for it would be a way to honor Betty's memory. In this small act of kindness, he would keep a part of her spirit alive. The squirrel, once frantic, now rested calmly in his palm, as if it too had found some measure of peace. And in that quiet moment, amid the fading echoes of fear and sorrow, Sebastian felt a flicker of hope. Though Betty was gone, her love, her compassion, and her gentle spirit would remain with him, carried forward in the smallest of ways.